last year, our daughter Adeline, who was 20 at the time, was in school, and she chose to do her big end of the year project on sexual abuse in the church. And so she's sharing this with me and with her dad and also with another adult. And as Adeline continues to talk about what she thinks about how the church has handled sexual abuse and some of the stats, the other adult interrupts her in the middle to say, Adeline, why do you want to talk about this stuff? And you might be thinking by the end of this series, Melissa, why do you want to talk about this stuff? The goal of this series is love. Love for the children in my church, love for the people who serve with the children in my church, love for the body of Christ. And if we believe the Bible and what the Bible says about the caring of the most vulnerable, Jesus actually says, it is better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and jump into the sea to drown to death than to harm a child. If I believe that to be true, which I do, that means there is a type of love to speak out, to show faces of predators, to say, it is not safe for children to be around you. You've lost the right. And it's also not safe for you. You will have to answer to God, I believe, one day. And if we're going to be a community who loves you, we want to keep you from children so you will not harm them for your own soul's sake. This was not intended to be a series. Trust me, I had one video to make and I'm like, just put your head down, Melissa. Just make this stupid video and get this over with. Say what you have to say and be done. And then it was 3:28 a.m. I think. I actually have a picture of it because I keep a photo journal. And so I popped open my photo journal and I wrote something about this stupid video has me up and some other thoughts that I had about it because I realized, you know, when you just get this sense and you just know it deep in the core of your being, and it just sort of plopped in out of nowhere. I literally woke up with the thought, which was, this is not one video, this is a series, and it starts, Melissa, with your story. And I'm like, no, please, Lord, no. Please just let this be one of those harebrained ideas that you get in the middle of the night, you know, and then you wake up and you're like, what was I thinking? Like, of course I'm not gonna do that. Of course I'm not. But unfortunately, I woke up in the morning and in the light of day, and I'm like, oh no, it's true. This is the way I think it's supposed to roll out. So the first 2 or 3 videos in this series, I'm gonna share with you my story. It is not a pretty story, and it does not have a happy ending. But I think before I can share with you what I wanna share with you, I think I have to do this step first. This story begins all the way back in the early 80s. I think it was probably 1981. I was a couple weeks shy of my 3rd birthday, and my beloved sister Martha was marrying this stranger. His name was Victor Gosnell. All I remember about the wedding day is that I was very grumpy about the whole thing. Number 1, I was not chosen to be a flower girl. Much like at the age of 45, I was the same at the age of 3. I did not like crowds, I did not like people, and I did not care for weddings. And so my sister was like, I don't want to risk it. Who knows what Melissa is gonna do? And so she chose our niece, Tracy, to be the flower girl instead. And this had me perturbed. And so I remember walking down the aisle in my little dress before the service officially started. But you know when the family members start walking down, and I stuck my tongue out. I tried to find this picture and I couldn't find it, but I stuck my tongue out the whole way down the aisle to show my disapproval. My family very much loved him, especially my parents. He was the ideal person. He was very religious. I would say he tipped in more to very strict rule following, very black and white, very moralistic. And my mom was like, yes, she married, my dad was an alcoholic. And so Victor seemed like the perfect man, kind, gentle, caring. He was gonna be a pastor. He went to seminary. This guy had a lot going for him. Now, I didn't understand all that. All I knew is that things were going to change. I knew my sister was moving thousands of miles away and she would be gone from me again. And this time, instead of being gone to school, she's now building a life with this strange man. I wasn't super happy about it. My parents may have been happy, but I was not. Martha was 19 years older than me. My poor parents. My mom was 45 years old when she found out she was pregnant with me. Surprise. I was a great, unexpected, unasked for gift. My parents had celebrated 25 years together. They had 4 children who were basically out of the house. And then I arrive. And Martha, my big sister, had always been my protector. And I thought she was the most beautiful person in the whole world. I wanted to be just like her. She was going to be a teacher, and I wanted to be a teacher because she was a teacher. I wanted to wear makeup like she wore makeup. She was kind, she was loving, she never hit me, she didn't yell at me, she didn't pull my hair, she didn't throw me down. She was nice and kind and patient. She was like a mom to me. Being in her presence was the very idea of what safety meant. Now, as the next 2 years progressed, was 3 and then 4 years old, I got to know Victor a little more. Only on family vacations, a couple, 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, he would be around, like full time. And during that time, I really liked him. He was really good with kids. He would play with me. He would get down on the ground. He would show me magic tricks. He would play pretend and Barbies and cars, all the things I like to do, he would do. And you have to know that I was starved for male attention. My father was extremely detached. I should note, my mom was 46 when I actually was born, and my dad was 56. He was more like my grandfather than my dad, and he was very reserved, very quiet, very introverted, not a people person. Does this sound familiar? So when I got this attention from Victor, who was so praised in my family, like really, especially by my mom, put up on a pedestal of just being the best man in the whole world, I couldn't believe he would pay attention to me. When I was 3 and 4, there would be these really weird times. They were very confusing because 95% of the time I loved being around him. But there was this 5% where we would have these very aggressive, tickling sessions. That may sound strange, but I don't know what else to call them. It would happen in the middle of the living room where everybody was, and he would start to tickle me. You know, how you do with a kid. But it would escalate really quickly, and the tickling would become aggressive. And what I mean by that is he would use like his hip or his weight to pin my lower body down. He would take my wrists and hold my wrists above my head with one hand. His hands are going everywhere. And at times they're going inappropriate places. I'm asking him to stop, please stop. But I'm also laughing because I can't help it, because it does tickle and I am ticklish. And I would feel so bombarded and my body was just being touched everywhere that this rage would build up to where I would begin to rage cry. And when I would start to rage cry, out of so much fear and frustration and anger that this is happening to me and I can't stop it, I would hear from the kitchen or from the patio, "Melissa Sue, shut your mouth right now." This would be my mother. "Stop crying like an idiot. He is not doing anything to you." This would happen over and over and over. And I got used to knowing that I had to try to submit as best I could. And I remember there would be times I am trying to hold in my rage crying with everything in me. You know, when your throat is burning, my chest is tight, and typically I couldn't hold it at 3 and 4 years old. I just couldn't hold it in. And this would happen again and again. I want to pause here just for a second in my story, because I don't just want to tell my story to tell my story. I want us to be able to look at it and learn some things about what predatory behavior can look like. And for Victor, what this predatory behavior looked like was grooming. And grooming just literally means preparing someone or something for a specific purpose. It's a preparation. It's a getting ready for a specific purpose. And this is what he was doing. And I'll say it's quite ingenious. And here's what I mean by this. And I say that tongue in cheek. Of course, it's not ingenious. It's evil. Hello, editing Melissa here. You know you have a problem with interrupting when you interrupt your own self. I didn't get to my point, actually, which is the most crucial point about grooming. And that is, in this instance, as an example with tickling, if I were to have gone to my sister or my mom and told them that Victor was inappropriately touching me, which, by the way, I never did, but if I would have, it would have been so easy for him to pass this off as an innocent mistake. He's tickling and he accidentally touched somewhere he shouldn't have. He didn't mean to. This is how grooming works. It messes with your mind because your mind and your body are telling you one thing, but the person is acting as if it's innocent. There's a lot of things he was doing in those moments. Number one, he was physically touching me in places he should not have been. It was inappropriate in front of everybody. Now, what does that tell a 3 and 4-year-old? What he's doing is okay. Obviously, it's okay. Look, everybody is in the room. Number two, he knew my mom. He knew how our home operated. He knew in our house, a child's voice was not heard. And so he leveraged her voice to me to be able to say, Melissa, shut up and submit to what he's doing to you. You lay still. You take it. You endure. It doesn't matter if you don't like it or not. That's not the point. He's playing with you. He's being nice. He's showing you attention. And number three, what I learned and what he was teaching me through the grooming is that it didn't matter if I didn't like it. My body was not my own. It was his to determine what he was going to do to me, no matter if I liked it or not, no matter if I said, please stop, please stop, please stop. He was training both me and my family. But here's the thing as well, Victor was not my only problem at 3 and 4 years old. My opinion is that people who have predatory tendencies tend to pick people and families that are more vulnerable, that they can work their magic a little more easily in. And my family was definitely ripe for abuse. It's probably been within the last year or so. My sister Martha has told me, she has said, Melissa, I knew the hell you were living in. And she said, when I was young, I had 3 other siblings that we could kind of rally together and protect one another. You were there alone. And she said, I despised it. And I wanted to get you out of that house. And because of Martha's motherly affection toward me and a deep desire to protect me from what she knew, the physical, emotional, mental abuse that was happening in my home, she persisted each year in trying to get me out. And finally, it worked. I was 5 years old. I had just finished kindergarten. And finally, my mom had said that I could come to Lynchburg. We lived in Florida at the time. That I could come to Lynchburg and I could spend the summer with my sister. I was so happy. This is when the abuse really started. I can still picture the house and I can picture the inside of the house. It's crystal clear in my mind. I loved being with my sister. The house was peaceful and quiet and calm. She did arts and crafts with me. I had a little baby nephew that I really loved. But there would be these strange things that would happen in the night. I was a really frightened, scared kid. I didn't sleep very well, ever, no matter where I was. I would often get up in the middle of the night. I struggle to describe these nights. So let me just give you one example of what this looked like. Hey, it's me again. This is actually embarrassing, but I think it's important to show you what it looks like for someone to try to articulate their sexual abuse. I have spent hours working on the ability to articulate and communicate. I mean, probably hundreds of hours. And I want you to see what happens with someone who has trained and tried to be skilled in communicating, try to form a sentence. It does not even make any sense. And there's actually a scientific reason for this. There was a study done where they got sexual abuse victims to get into a brain scanner so they could see what was happening in the brain as the victim just thought about the abuse. They asked them to play it out in their head, to visualize it as their brains were being scanned. And they found something extraordinary. And that was that the center that is responsible for language, while the victims were thinking about the abuse, it was dark. So that means the part of the brain that's responsible for language is not working when it comes to sexual abuse and articulating that back out, which is why for so many of us, it is so hard to put these things into words. And so take a listen. This is what it sounded like for me. Me up in the middle of the night, and as soon as I get up, I'm struggling through to try, I'm losing my words to try to give you an idea of what this looked like. So let me give you a specific example. So what this would look like, I got up in the middle of the night. I was sleeping on the floor in their bedroom because I was scared. And at some point I got up off my bed and I went to wake my sister up. But as usual, Victor must have been a lighter sleeper because he would always pop up first. And so one thing that, my sister and my mom, but especially both my sisters actually, the way that you could get me to sleep was if you tickled me. I don't mean tickled. I mean like, sort of rubbed and tickled. I was a very tactile, touchy kid. I'm looking through pictures to do this and it's like, I'm always on someone. I'm touching someone. I was a very touchy kid. If you know me now, you're like, seriously, Melissa? Yes. And that was taken advantage of. And so what he would do in this particular instance, in this particular night, is that he pulled me in bed with him on his side, not in between him and Martha, but on his side. And he tickled me, right? Because this is what my family does to get Melissa to go back to sleep. But instead of tickling me like my sisters did, this was different. And I remember feeling just mostly confused by the whole thing and sort of looking at his face, and it had like the blue hue of the moon coming through the window. Like I can still see his face so close to mine. The overwhelming feeling was, I'm confused. What is this? I don't understand. This particular night, when we woke up in the morning, I sit up in the bed. He was already out of the bed. He's an early riser. He always brought my sister coffee in bed first thing in the morning. He's a good husband. And as I'm sitting up in the bed and my sister is on this side of me and she's sitting up in the bed and Victor's standing and he's talking to my sister, but he's kind of talking to me. Do you know how adults will do sometimes? It kind of sounded like this. Sissy got up in the middle of the night. We had to be really quiet, didn't we? We were really quiet. We didn't want to wake up sister or the baby. So we were really quiet. He's giggling at me, at her. So I tickled Sissy to sleep and then she went to sleep. And as I listened real intently, because I was confused from my perspective at 5 years old, what it sounded like and felt like to me is he's telling her what happened. She's smiling and thinks it's good. It doesn't quite seem right and it feels really confusing. But I guess that's just okay. I believe with an untrained, I have no training. I do believe this is another example of what grooming looks like. In that moment, he is using now my sister's voice. It's not what she's thinking, but that's what my little mind is thinking, that she's giving consent to him putting me back to sleep by tickling me inappropriately. So not only does my mom approve and say, shut your mouth and endure it, lay still and endure it. Now, in my own mind, my sister now approves of it. Even at the age of 5, I learned that life was just hard. And this was another thing that was just hard and confusing and I didn't like. But guess what? I didn't like a lot of life. By the next summer I was 6, they had moved houses. They were only in this house, this next house when I was 6 for 1 year. Now, I remembered when I was 5, I could walk you through that house. I remember almost nothing of my 6-year-old summer. I only remember what is outside of the house, like the pool in the front yard. I know what the outside of the house looked like. I could tell you that. I could walk you around the house. I have almost no memory of what happened inside that house. And I don't think I remember because I don't think it was good. I had asked my sister to think back to that particular house because they were only there 1 year. I was only in it for 1 year. And so I asked her to think back and just try to see if she could remember anything that just felt a little off. Did she see anything? Did she hear anything? Like, was there anything? And I know I'm asking her this has been 35 years ago, but she did come back and was like, you know what? I did remember something. She said she had gone to the grocery store. She had taken my little baby nephew. There were 2 other family members in the house, and there was Victor and there was me. But when she came home, the 2 other family members were in the living room. Victor and I were nowhere to be found. And so as she's walking into the kitchen, sort of wondering like, where did they go? Victor was bringing me down out of the attic. And what you need to know about the attic was, it was actually kind of like a spare bedroom. There was actually a bed up there, and I guess they had some like storage as well, but it was used as like a spare bedroom. So she felt really confused about why we'd be coming down the steps. And so when she asked Victor what we were doing, he said that I had wanted to read and see his comic books. I've never liked comic books. Actually, I had a thing against comic books, but his story was, that was my idea, that I wanted to see the comic books. So he took me up into the attic to see the comic books. And that stuck with her for 35 years once she had thought back to it, because she thought it was very strange. I continued visiting every single summer until I was 11, and we actually moved to Lynchburg from Florida. Now, in some of those years, he didn't touch me. I don't understand the psychology behind why that would be. And so some of the summers in Lynchburg were completely wonderful and beautiful. And then we moved here. I was 11 years old that summer, and I spent a lot of time at my sister's house. One, they had kids that were around my age. I was able to help babysit because I was a few years older. My school was in literal walking distance. I could walk to school. I loved my sister. I wanted to be around her. I loved my nieces and nephews. I wanted to be around them. And so I stayed there a lot. These years of 11 and 12 are the most intense years of abuse that I experienced. It was right after my 12th birthday, around that time, that my mom had left because my grandmother, who lived in Roanoke, was dying. And my mom was going to help my aunt just in this full-time caring for my grandmother as she's dying and at home. And so my mom was gone for at least 2 months. And while my mom was gone, it was decided that I would stay at Martha and Victor's for a lot of reasons, convenience being one of them, that I could walk to school and walk home from school. There was a Wednesday night when I had not felt like going to church. You know, I kind of didn't feel good, but it wasn't like a sick didn't feel good. I was somebody who did not do well, still don't do well, with crowds and stressors, like outside stressors. And school was always hard for the sights and sounds and all the activity. I loved school, I loved the learning aspect, but I didn't like that aspect. And sometimes I would just be completely tired out. And this was one of those days where I could not imagine having to get back out and go into Awana's or whatever else we were doing. It's just like, I can't do it. So I told my sister, I said, I'm not feeling good. Can I stay home from church? And she said, sure. And I don't know why that hadn't entered my mind that I wouldn't be completely alone. But as soon as she's on the phone to him, I'm starting to get this real sinking feeling in my gut, like, oh no. I felt terrified, I felt frozen, I felt trapped. And I kept telling myself, Melissa, why are you acting like this? Just get over it. Just, these feelings of like, just endure, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Just shut up, just do it. Just stop overreacting, stop dramatizing. You're being a baby, just stop. And I'm having this internal conversation and she's talking to him. And I can still picture her standing, in the kitchen by the back door on the phone, wrapping, it was kind of like a long cord, and she was wrapping the phone cord around her hand as she's talking to him. And I just get this like more and more sick feeling in my gut that I know he's coming home. And basically she was just saying, hey, Liz, that's what they would call me. Hey, Liz is gonna be, she's gonna be home when you get here. So just check in on her, make sure she's okay. And we're heading to church. Once Martha and the kids left, I don't know why I did this, but I went directly into their bedroom and I laid on their bed. I think these are these wacky stories where it's like, she wanted it. Oh my goodness, it's such ignorance. The 12-year-old was asking for it. These things are so complicated. You are groomed and trained in such a way to submit and comply and play nice and be nice. And yet, you get seen as, the girl who wants it, right? I don't know why I did it, but that's what I did. And I sat there just waiting, terrified, anxious, scared. And I hear finally the key in the door, and I hear the door opening and his footsteps in the kitchen. He's coming in the back door and kind of like walking around the kitchen a bit. And I thought, well, maybe he's just gonna leave me alone and go down in the basement and work or something. But sure enough, I hear his steps coming down the hallway and opening the door. And when he opens the door, he says to me, "Oh, Liz, you're not feeling good. I'm so sorry. Do you want some Tylenol?" Now, I did not need Tylenol. I don't know why I said yes, but I said yes. I was like, sure, yes, thank you. I felt in that moment, because I didn't have a dad who cared for me, it just felt so special to be seen, by a man. And so I said, yes, I will take the Tylenol. And so he goes back into the kitchen. I can hear his footsteps going back into the kitchen. And I was thinking then of like, Melissa, like, what's your problem? He's so kind and nice. Like, what is your problem? You are such a drama queen. And so he comes back in, he has a glass of water, and he has 2 pills. And I take them. And I lay back down, and he goes away. And it's maybe 10 minutes goes by, and I'm kind of drifting off to sleep. And he comes in and he sits on the side of the bed, and he starts tickling my back. I don't mean tickling me, I mean rubbing my back. And I thought, oh no. What am I doing? Like, what? Get up, like, get up. But at this point, I actually thought I must be really sick, because I feel so tired. I felt like, I remember thinking this exact thing. I feel like I'm sinking into the bed, but I'm also floating. Like I was heavy and I was floaty. And I thought, I'm really sick because I don't feel right. And I knew I didn't feel right. And he left. Like I was drifting in and out of sleep, but then he left. And I felt so much relief, right? So much relief. And so I went to sleep. I was in and out of consciousness after that. And I'm gonna, this is the hardest part of my story, one of them in this season. This scene sort of duplicated in different places in the house, but being drugged, waking up, having his head over me, being confused, not understanding what's happening, really confused, just confused. And then would fall back to sleep and then would wake up again and he would be gone. And I would think, what a terrible dream. I'm a terrible person. That's a terrible dream. I'm like an adulteress. That's what I am. And that belief about myself, being an adulteress, has stuck with me, into my adulthood. You have these experiences with another person and no one else. It can feel a little bit like you're crazy, like you're making it up, even though you know you're not. But there's nobody else to verify it except for this man who is not going to verify it. My nephew Tim is the one that had this idea where he was like, ask my mom, ask her to give it some real time and thought. And so when I'd asked her about the house, I asked her about this as well. In the Biltmore house, did anything seem strange to you? Did you see anything? Did you hear anything? She did not know anything about this night at all. I was not sharing details with anyone, including my husband, besides my counselor. And so she had no context for what I just told you. She was only looking back on anything that felt strange to her. When she brought back this list of things that didn't quite feel right to her after knowing what she knows now on her list, this was so helpful to me. It was so validating. She said, there was this one night. We had been gone, me and the kids. I don't know where we went, but we were gone. And it was just you and Victor at the house. And I came home and you were in our bed and I could not wake you up. You would not get up. Now, this is very strange. I'm an obedient child. I am quick to respond. Abuse will do that to you. You become very obedient very quickly. And so she said, it was so strange. I would go in and be like, Liz, it's time to get up. You need to go downstairs and do your bedroom. And she'd walk back out and then she'd look at her and be like, what? She's still in there. And she said it took her 30 or 45 minutes to get me up. And then she said, once I was up, that I looked like a zombie. Now I remember, as she's saying that, I'm like, yeah, we talked about that the next morning, right? Because I have no memory of getting up. I have no memory of getting myself into bed. That's gone. And we chalked it up to, I guess she didn't feel good. And that's what started a very intense season, probably 4 to 6 weeks of intense abuse that included giving me medication that made me physically ill, so much so that my sister, because my mom's gone, remember, she's gone taking care of my grandmother. My sister is toting me to doctors and saying something's wrong. I can't get her up. She's nauseous. She's dizzy. Something's wrong. And they're doing all kinds of tests and they can find nothing. And then I would go right back into the house with him, giving me special drinks, taking care of me on his lunch breaks when nobody else was at the house because I missed 2 weeks or more of school in the 6th grade during this time. So I was at home alone and he would come home take care of me. Once my grandmother had passed away, my mom was then back in town, and I was back to being at home, at least at night, full time. And as soon as my mom got back, it was within a couple days of being out of Martha and Victor's house that suddenly, no more dizziness, no more nausea, no more sleeping 18 hours a day. I felt okay, at least physically, I felt okay. And everyone chalked it up to Melissa must have just missed mom. She must have just been anxious, and her body must have just been acting up out of fear and anxiety. Then once again, there is years without incident. I don't know why. It wasn't until I was 19. My brother had died, and we were driving from Lynchburg to Florida for his funeral. And this time, when Victor assaulted me, I was not drugged. I was not confused like a 5-year-old. I was fully conscious and fully aware, and I completely understood what he was doing and that what he was doing was wrong. And so I waited until after the funeral to tell my mom. And I remember walking into where she was sitting at the kitchen table, and I just said it. I said exactly what he had done. And she said to me, Melissa, do you want to kill your sister? Killing my sister, hurting my sister, would be the last thing on earth I would ever want to do. She was my protector. I adored her. I did not want to hurt her. I didn't want words that I'm saying to bring harm to her. And so I shoved that down as far as it would go. If it was here, like, I shoved it all the way down as far as I could get it to go. And I left it. And I left my childhood behind and said, I'm not gonna let that affect me. I'm not gonna think about all that stuff. I'm gonna let it go. But here's the thing about abuse of all kinds, but most certainly sexual abuse, is that is a kind of wounding. It's like it branches off into every area, from my marriage to my parenting to my friendships. It twists and distorts it all. I was so angry, I was so broken, but yet I can't even say there was an unwillingness to speak. It felt as if I cannot. I cannot tell my family this. Because guess who's to blame when the whole thing falls apart? The person whose words expose the truth. And yeah, you can hear all day, it's not your fault, but you're the one initiating it. You're the one bringing it to light. And I just wasn't willing to do that until in 2017, I sensed what I thought was from God, this whisper to sit down from ministry, from teaching women the Bible. Sit down, Melissa, and shut your mouth. I need you to be quiet. I had no idea that by sitting down and being quiet, that stuff that I had pressed down as best I could was slowly rising to my throat. It's like I could feel it in my throat. Like, this is gonna come out and explode. I'm gonna save that part of the story for part 2. What happens when, as an adult, you come to your family and you tell them these things? What happens? And what happens when you decide to go to the police?
Hello.
Hey, Victor, it's Melissa.
Hi, Liz.
I know you requested or said you were willing to talk to me, but I wasn't willing yet to talk to you. And that's because, it took me some time to learn to stand and face. So this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn how to stand and face and not run and avoid. And I think you're willing to help me. Is that right? Do you feel open to that?
I'll say anything I can do, I'm willing to do. I am so sorry. I can't tell you how sorry I am. I can never tell you how sorry I am.
That's what we're going, and I hope you'll stick around. I don't need you to hear my story, but I deeply want you to hear the themes and what we can squeeze out of it to learn for our kids, that these things will not be repeated, that we would be educating ourselves on what it looks like and sounds like, especially within the church. Especially within the church, we're the body of Christ. And this isn't something for leadership to take care of. This is my problem. This is your problem if you're a part of the church. It's our problem to solve. And I don't know exactly how to do that besides this and this series, When Predators Go to Church. I wish they'd stop coming to church. I hope you'll consider sharing this. If this has been helpful or informative, I hope you'll consider sharing it and having hard conversations with each other. If I gotta do it, you gotta do it. Okay, see you next week. Click here for part 2.